Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the college lecture. I do apologize for the slight delay because the speaker has been slightly late. This is a joint as usual with one of our sister colleges. And this time, interestingly, our partnership is with a very young college, which is the College of Critical, the Ceylon College of Critical Care Specialists of Sri Lanka. So I would like to warmly welcome Dr. Dilshan Priyankara, the president of the college, the Ceylon College of Critical Care Specialists, to co-chair this session with me and to introduce the speaker and the session. Over to you, Dilshan.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure to be here in this forum of Young Physicians Forum and the college lecture. And I would like to thank the Ceylon College of Physicians for arranging such meetings, especially with the sister colleges and us being the youngest at the moment. And critical care specialty, I think, is talked all over the world, especially during the pandemic of COVID. And we have one of our members who is Dr. Manik Lokuge, who is a consultant intensivist at the teaching hospital Karapitiya, looking after COVID ICU. And thank you, Manik, for coming all the way from Karapitiya. And I think she's going to talk to us on the experience of ECMO in COVID-19 patients. I think it's another hot topic which was discussed and discussing at the moment. And I would like to invite Dr. Manik Lokuge to deliver your lecture.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dilshan, for those kind words of introduction. ECMO in COVID-19 Sri Lankan experience and lessons learned today for tomorrow. That is my topic for today. And I would like to thank Ceylon College of Physicians and Ceylon College of Critical Care Specialists for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. I'm not going to talk about COVID-19, but I would like to touch upon Sri Lankan current situation, which is rapidly worsening, increased number of patients, and we see more severe disease. As a result of which, my topic comes into play, the role of ECMO, which is form of very hi-fi life support system. So particularly with the emergence of more and more Delta variant, patients with more and more Delta variant, you can see top right-hand corner, that is from TH Karapitiya data over the July, as well as entire month of July, and as well as first week of August, where our RAT positivity rate almost has trebled. And lower left-hand corner, you can see the Sri Lankan situation compared to worldwide situation. Daily new confirmed COVID-19 deaths per million people. Both are not looking very good at the moment. So let's see the role in role of TH Karapitiya. Karapitiya Teaching Hospital is the National Center for ECMO in Sri Lanka. All of us are part of GELSA, that is Gold Extracorporeal Life Support Association. And of course, TH Karapitiya is a member of ELSO, that is Extracorporeal Life Support Organization, as well as Southwest Asia and Africa chapter of ELSO. So far, let's see our experience in ECMO. So far, before COVID, we have supported 35 patients, out of which 18 survived. So that is 51.4% survival rate. And post-COVID, we have catered for 4 patients and 1 has survived. For certain conditions, ECMO do much better than when compared to others. Neonatal meconium aspiration syndrome is one of those, 100% survival, comparable to worldwide data. And of course, we have the largest database for leptospirosis with pulmonary hemorrhages at the moment. So ECMO, there are mainly 2 types of ECMO. VV ECMO, mainly to support lungs, and VA ECMO, mainly to support cardiac dysfunction. For COVID-19, what we are interested is about VV ECMO. This is a very simple diagrammatic presentation of what VV ECMO does. You can see there are 2 venous cannulas. both are venous accesses. There are two venous cannulas. One is a drainage cannula, which you can see in the right femoral vein and tip lying at the upper part of the inferior vena cava, where you will draw blood out from the patient as the inflow to the ECMO machine. That pump is the one which actually drives blood out. That is the main part, and it gives over to the oxygenator. Oxygenator is the one where it is the place where all the gas exchange happens, and treated blood in the red color goes back to basically returns to the patient through the internal jugular vein access. These accesses can change, but this is what we do commonly. So there are two ECMO machines, basically two ECMO consoles with one backup in TH Karapitiya and one machine in Led Ridgeway Hospital. So let's talk about post-COVID era, that is peri-COVID, I would say. We supported the first patient end of January this year during the second wave. And during the third wave, we supported 3 patients so far. Since that first patient was referred to us, there were 18 referrals, but we were able to accommodate only 4 patients due to various reasons. Let's talk about several case scenarios, and then I will tell you what we have learned from those case scenarios. First patient, Mr. GD, 31-year-old, who had a previous history of diabetes, hyperlipidemia, and dyslipidemia, who was obese with a weight of 120 kilos, who was transferred from CEBH for ECMO. It was a rather late presentation to the hospital, that is to the CEBH. On admission, he was hypoxic and admitted straight away to ICU and started on CPAP support, in addition to routine self-proning and so on. He was deteriorating on CPAP, so they decided to intubate and ventilate and transfer to THK for possible ECMO support. So he went on ECMO on the same night. He stayed on ECMO for 7 days. Initially, after starting ECMO treatment, his oxygenation as well as ventilatory parameters improved quite a lot, significantly. But unfortunately, they started declining later. Another unfortunate thing, we grew. Basically, all the cultures grew multi-drug resistant Klebsiella. Even the cultures which were sent at CEBH before transferring, last set, grew MDR Klebsiella. His oxygenation gradually started failing. Thinking for this big-made man, this venous cannula is not big enough, ECMO team decided to go ahead and insert another drainage cannula. I must say, that is a very difficult task, even though it is very simple to tell. Because once the patient is fully anticoagulated, inserting another venous cannula is a very difficult task. However, he had severe sepsis, multi-organ dysfunction, and patient expired. Let's see the issues that we have faced at that time, end of January. If I remember correctly, 27th of January. We were not prepared at all. But we had to accept the patient due to quite a lot of external pressures to do something. We had quite a lot of infrastructure issues. Mind you, at that time, Karapitiya was not even a treatment center for COVID. So we did not have a dedicated location, no dedicated allocated staff. Even the simple things like transport of specimens, fetching lab reports, getting inward investigations done were a chore. Very difficult tasks. And of course, there were certain issues related to the patient. Patient was quite obese, which is a relative contraindicator. When I mention about the indications and contraindications, I will touch upon that. And he also had multiple medical issues. And the fact that he was on, if I remember correctly, nearly 10 days of CPAP. That is not another good predictor for ECMO. And the fact that we have isolated MDR Klebsiella from all his cultures very quickly, very early in the treatment, again was another very bad factor. We had other technical issues. We needed at some point just after starting CRRT, at some point after starting ECMO, at some point he needed renal replacement therapy. However, there were no access. Initially, before starting ECMO, we thinking that he might need CRRT, we preemptively inserted a VASCAT. However, that also had to be utilized to insert the second venous drainage cannula. You have seen from the previous diagrammatic representation, we use right internodular, right internodular and right femoral as drainage and return cannulas, for drainage and return cannulas. And then left internodular we keep for CVP, for whatever the thing, whatever the other thing that institution of CRRT or whatever the other thing, we only have the left femoral access. But when you use that for another venous cannula, we don't have another access. Unfortunately, the available CRRT machine could not be piggyback to the ECMO machine, because CRRT usually runs at a flows of about 200 to 250 milliliters per minute, whereas ECMO runs at a flow of about 4.5 to 5 liters per minute, which is not compatible with our old conventional CRRT machine. And of course, he required imaging, but we couldn't get it done because we didn't know whether our old ECMO machine with old battery could tolerate mobile ECMO. So let's talk about the second clinical scenario. That patient was referred to us during the very beginning of third wave, end of April. Still, we had many unresolved issues. However, deciding to accept the patient, almost overnight, 7-bedded main ITU was converted to a COVID ICU to accept the ECMO candidate. When you do something overnight, definitely it is inadequately prepared. So quite a lot of resistance from staff, and staff was very unhappy. However, we accepted the patient. Second patient, Mrs. LP, 44-year-old primary mother in her 24th week of pregnancy. Again, referred and transferred from CEBH, initially managed with CPAP. I think, again, another 6 or 7 days on CPAP, intubated, ventilated by the time we got the patient on high supports. Again, went on ECMO same night. She survived on ECMO for 11 days, during which period she miscarried, resulting in massive postpartum hemorrhage, given the fact that she was fully anticoagulated at that time. However, we noted once you manage those initial problems, her blood gases were perfectly normal. The saturation was always more than 97. And while on full ECMO support. However, ventilation, we noted that was extremely difficult. Tidal volumes, we could not deliver more than 15 to 20 milliliters per cycle. And of course, she blew her pupils halfway through her treatment course. Therefore, we had concerns about her brain also. She needed imaging again to understand what is going on, but still, we did not have any experience on ECMO. This time, multidisciplinary team, meticulously planned how to transfer this patient on ECMO to get the CT done at least. And our good perfusionist stayed with the patient just to check the battery power of this ECMO machine and found out we could do it. It consumed quite a lot of manpower, as you can see. See how many people are involved and how many machines and how many tubes and how many things can go wrong while we transfer a patient on ECMO. Unfortunately, our COVID ICU is located at one end of the hospital, whereas the dedicated CT room for COVID patients is located at the other end of the hospital. So we had to transfer. This is what we found. She had a large subarachnoid hemorrhage. And you can't see it from the rest of the film. You can't see the rest of the film, but she had evidence of tonsillar herniation also. And if you see the CT chest, you can see that hardly any aeration to the lungs. In addition, lungs basically look like liver. Severe consolidation due to COVID pneumonia. On day 11 on ECMO, she went into cardiac arrest. So that was our second patient. Third patient, clinical case scenario 3. Mr. NC, a 40-year-old poorly controlled type 1 diabetic man. By the time, there was a bit of a delay in referring to ICU as well as referring to ECMO for this patient. You have to understand that by this time, this was in the middle of May. We did not have very good experience with intubated COVID pneumonia patients at that time. Even now, we don't have very good experience with intubated COVID pneumonias. So, medical team was trying to manage this patient with non-invasive therapy as long as possible. So by the time patient was referred to us, when he was failing on CPAP and high flow, they have tried everything out. On arrival to ICU, which is about 300 meters away from the level 2 COVID ward, his saturation has dropped to 60%. So immediately intubated, started on ventilating with very high settings, very high supports. He went on ECMO next day. Initially, again, he was stable on ECMO, even though we have noted that he is very hypercoagulable while on fully anticoagulation. Later, we noted that he was dropping his saturations and ECMO flows. We initially suspected whether the lines were clotted. Later realized that it was not so. And then suspecting inadequate size of drainage cannula, team decided to add an extra venous cannula even. Later only, next day only, we realized by reducing, when the saturation drops, our gut feeling is to go on up, increase the ECMO flows in order to increase oxygen saturation. However, this patient did not respond in that way. We realized by dropping the ECMO flow, saturation actually improved in this man. We thought the possibility of collapse of IVC with very high venous drainage. However, on day 5 on ECMO, again, he blew his pupils. So, making use of our previous experience, we transported him on mobile ECMO for CT, and this is what we found. It was a large ICH with midline shift, mass effect, and everything. He also had evidence of tonsillar herniation. So, entire team was very unhappy. It was very disheartening to see patients dying like this. 2 patients that we managed to do CT, we saw ICH. So team was thinking whether this is the correct decision. Should we continue on ECMO, ECMO facility or not? Then, after several MDTs, decided to take the opinion of other centers, particularly in UK. And of course, to do a literature survey more thoroughly. This is what we found. This slide is based on 2 references. I have mentioned those in the last part of the slide. So devastating ICH during VV ECMO for COVID-19. There they have mentioned that COVID-19 is an independent risk factors for coagulopathy and thrombosis, both. It is not clear why this happens, why high rate of ICH is seen in this population. May be related to vascular inflammation associated with COVID itself, endothelial injury, dysregulation of coagulation. Maybe things are getting exacerbated by the extracorporeal circuit itself. We never know. And of course, we can't forget the fact that patients are fully anticoagulated. They have to be. Otherwise, you can't continue ECMO. Oxygenator will clot. However, they have mentioned in their own studies as limitations, low number of patients studied, and different anticoagulation protocols in different centers, and different selection criteria in different centers. So, of course, multi-center studies with larger numbers are necessary. We revised ECMO selection criteria. We thought that we were recruiting patients who might not benefit. We were recruiting patients who might not have benefited. So let's see who are considered for ECMO life support. It's a form of life support. It's not a treatment by itself. It's a temporary life support for severe respiratory or cardiac failure, which is not responding to the conventional treatment, or conventional treatment is giving more harm than good. And of course, the condition has to be reversible, either spontaneously or with treatment. Otherwise, there's no point. And of course, ECMO is offered as a bridge to devices or organ transplantation. As I mentioned earlier, it's not a treatment, it's a form of a life support. So regarding the selection criteria and indications, of course, it has to be severe disease, as indicated by PF ratio. Certain centers have taken as PF ratio less than 80 with FiO to 90% and Murray score of 3 to 4. Patients should have been on ventilatory support for less than 7 days. And mind you, by that time, we were considering only the invasive mechanical ventilation duration. We were not really considering CPAP and NIV duration. And latest information we heard from UK was that basically we have to consider both invasive as well as non-invasive ventilation, because during both those occasions, lung damage tend to occur. And age, younger the better. So this value is arbitrary, but it has to be younger the better. And absence of any serious or poorly controlled comorbidity. Selection of a patient for ECMO is not a single person's decision. It's a multidisciplinary team decision. And of course, even though we have these indications or selection criteria, each and every case is decided on case-by-case basis. And we take into consideration many factors, including the survivability of the patient, risk of development of complications, etc. Of course, we need to keep the emotions out of the decision. It is not going to get us anywhere. If ECMO is deemed indicated, and we should go for it quite early, as outcome is getting worse if you delay it. There are certain contraindications. These are all actually relative contraindications rather than absolute contraindication. Obesity. The cannulation is quite difficult. Uncontrolled or poorly controlled coagulopathy, because it is very difficult to anticoagulate the patient. And latest also recommendation is that the criteria, contraindications has to be more stringent, as ECMO capacity diminishes worldwide. With the increased demand, you have to be more selective. ECMO for COVID. The role of ECMO for cardiopulmonary failure due to COVID-19 is evolving. We don't have much evidence. However, when compared to the beginning, now we have 19 months worth of evidence. Those evidence have shown that there's 48% in-hospital mortality rates worldwide, where 52% survived. And this outcome is quite comparable to both pre-COVID. So it is COVID patients are not doing worse, even though they are having certain other problems like ICH, increased ICH and everything. We also revisited the ECMO anticoagulation criteria. This is one area we were quite worried, because those patients, 2 patients had ICH and SAH. We are using heparin in our center for anticoagulation. Certain centers in other countries use enoxaparin, low molecular weight heparin rather. We use this because it's easy to monitor. We monitor with ACT initially every hour, later once the patient is more stable, 2 hours or so. And then we also do APTT and platelet count at least twice daily. Target ACT is activated clotting time is 180 to 220 seconds, whereas APTT ratio is 1.5 to 2. Platelet count, we always try to keep above 100,000. Sometimes it's very difficult because of destruction of the extracorporeal circuit. Destruction due to the extracorporeal circuit rather. So having discussed with other centers, we decided not to change our anticoagulation protocol. Actually, we are not doing worse. Armed with all this information available, we proceeded to accept the 4th case. Mrs. SM, 36-year-old P3C3 mother, who was immediately postpartum, again referred from BH Homagama. She was admitted to the Homagama on day 2 of illness, having found that symptomatic and rat positive, and at 34 weeks of pregnancy, underwent LSCS next day, and went on CPAP and tocilizumab given and other treatment instituted. Patient was referred to Karapitiya for ECMO support, consideration of ECMO support on day 5 of CPAP as her oxygen requirement is increasing. HRCT they have done there has shown that severe COVID pneumonia. This early referral is due to the fact that by that time we have strictly decided on not to accept patients, not to consider patients who was on CPAP plus mechanical ventilation for more than 7 days. So by day 5, they referred to us. We got her down on non-invasive ventilation and observed for 2 days with frequent and regular multidisciplinary team meetings held, basically in the ICU itself. She was not getting worse. If at all, she was improving. So collective decision together with the ECMO team, referring consultant from Homagama, and the treating physician at Karapitiya, and of course with the patient who was maintaining quite all right, decided not to go for ECMO as clinically improving. That was a very difficult decision at that time, because by that time, if we have decided that not to go for ECMO and next day, if she is deteriorating, that at that time, ECMO is not an option. So it was always a battle between suitability versus timing versus risk of complications. Gradually, oxygen was weaned, and basically the oxygen weaned up to 2 liters of oxygen, 2 liters per minute via nasal cannula. So at that time, ECMO point of view, that was the correct decision. So next patient, this was the latest patient, Mr. D, who was 37-year-old, previously healthy. Day 6 of illness, presented to a ICC in private sector, found to have RAT positive. On admission to ICC, he was severely hypoxic, and they have detected that he was having very high blood sugars. The good physician, rational physician who treated him there, decided to transfer the patient to Karapitiya. On admission to Karapitiya, patient was in severe DKA. Patient was in DKA and severe hypoxia. pH was almost just below 6, I think. He was intubated and ventilated immediately, and DKA was medically managed. Pronin did not help him adequately. And of course, to make the matters worse, we found that he was having high CRP and high procalcitonin. So tocilizumab also was not an option for him. Source of sepsis was unclear. So DKA was thought to be secondary to either sepsis or secondary to COVID itself. Within 12 hours of admitted to ICU, we decided to refer him to ECMO, accepted, and ECMO was started with cytosol, with very good results, as I will show you later. So ECMO day 8, he was awake and responding, cooperative, and then we decided to go ahead and extubate him. So while he's on awake ECMO, we decided to extubate him. He was very cooperative. 3 days later, successfully decannulated on ECMO day 11. And then last Saturday, he was stepped down from ICU to HDU. At the moment, he is still in HDU at the day 14 of ICU. You can clearly see this man with the ET tube as well as with the ECMO cannula. However, he seems to be fully alert, awake. And now this one shows where he was extubated to a high flow nasal. However, ECMO is still running. Now you can see on high flow nasal cannula, but ECMO is out, decannulated. And this is the good team, dedicated team. Weaning from ECMO. Usually, when a patient is on ECMO, there are 2 types of weaning. We have to consider weaning from ventilation as well as weaning from ECMO. So whether to extubate before decannulation or decannulate before extubation, it's a matter of debate always. Practices, of course, differ between centers. Advantages of early extubation, as we did for our patient, are ability to stop sedation, and sedation-related side effects like delirium and everything will be much less. And of course, reduction in risk of development of VAP, ventilator-associated pneumonia, and ventilator-associated lung injury. On the other hand, many people, actually more people than earlier, prefer to remove the most invasive treatment first, to say that is the ECMO, because it is less workload and less anticoagulation related issues. So selection of which patient to undergo which is depending on many factors, highly individualized. All will depend on patient dynamics and treating clinicians' preference among several other factors. So I'm not going to talk much about awake ECMO. Awake ECMO, to do that, patient has to be really geared. If the patient is delirious or if the patient accidentally pulls out a cannula, imagine 4.5 liters per minute draining from that cannula. Within 1 minute, he will get exsanguinated and he will die. So patient has to be really geared, team has to be really geared. We managed awake ECMO for this patient for 3 days. Common issues or challenges rather, related to all ECMOs are anticoagulation. Anticoagulation is a must. Without anticoagulation, no ECMO. And of course, we see quite a lot of frequent and severe infections. Maybe it is because of increased number of invasive lines. Maybe it is because large blood flow spreading any tiny infection everywhere in the body. We don't know. And of course, in COVID situation, patients are immunosuppressed. So there may be other reasons. And progression of the underlying disease, of course, we have to consider. It's a challenge because we expect, when we institute ECMO support for COVID-19, severe COVID-19 pneumonia patients, we think that the lung will recover at one point. What if that will not recover? And what if goes into severe fibrosis and respiratory failure? Then we have to decide a way out. Renal impairment is quite common and it is multifactorial. This is something that I want to touch upon. Last patients, we did ECMO with cytosorb, particularly because he could not be given IL-6 mediated therapy. He could not receive tocilizumab because of high CRP and everything. So extracorporeal hemoadsorption was used. This was piggyback to the ECMO circuit very successfully. However, this is very costly. We had to use, I think, 2 cytosorb for him. ECMO and CRRT. I told you, conventional CRRT machines are not compatible with ECMO circuit. They cannot be piggyback because of very high flows. However, the very first patient whom basically required CRRT that we could not institute, their family and friends got together and donated this machine. This is a newer form of Infomed machine, which can be piggyback to the ECMO circuit. So far, we have not used it. We did not require for the last patient even. However, if it is necessary, we can use this. And cytosorb also can be utilized with the same thing. So what did we achieve so far? What did we learn? Many things. For the first time, we transported patients on ECMO. We are not at a level of inter-hospital transfers yet, but we are certainly at a level of intra-hospital transfers. With that, we were able to get imaging done on ECMO. First patient, we could not get any imaging because we did not know how to transfer. And of course, we have laid down new and more stringent admission criteria, which is ultimately going to help the patient. Because if you relax your admission criteria, that's ultimately not going to help the patient. Most importantly, we have learned when to say no, even for a referral, as we did for the patient number 3, patient number 4. Not to go ahead, when not to go ahead. And of course, increased awareness among those who treat critically ill COVID pneumonia patients, importance on timely referral, mainly our physician friends. And we did the first awake ECMO in Sri Lanka. We reached ECMO with CRRT and of course, ECMO with cytosorb. Those are for the first time in Sri Lanka. And of course, we have restarted the in-service program, ECMO training, and we still have an ongoing battle against healthcare-associated infections. This is the ECMO referral form. I'm not going to go through this. ECMO team comprises of cardiothoracic team, doctors, nurses, perfusionists, intensive care team, respiratory team, transfusion medicine team, microbiology team, physiotherapist, and many more people, including administrators. And of course, we require technical support from individuals and companies. When something goes wrong, we need to ask from someone. We should be able to have a higher support from someone. On the other hand, there is a downside, cost. To institute ECMO on one patient, it cost about 1 million. So 3 to 4 lakhs out of that 10 lakhs will go to the oxygenator, which is not reusable. However, this is in Sri Lanka. Apart from the oxygenator, we reuse, we sterilize and reuse most of our other cannulas, tubing, and pump head and everything. So that is the cost. And of course, technical issues. Patient might need proning. However, once you establish ECMO, even though it is described in literature, it's very difficult. As I told you, if accidentally one cannula or one connection comes out, that's going to be the end of the patient. So it's very difficult technically to prone a patient. There's a very steep learning curve. And of course, need for dedicated staff. With this current 4-year annual transfer process, basically once a doctor or someone get trained, that person ultimately get transferred. So always we are starting from the scratch. What to remember when referring? This is for basically treating physicians. Refer early. Initially, we might not accept because we might not have enough space and everything. We might think that this is not the appropriate time. But therefore, check with the ECMO team regularly. Give an update. Any single change in the patient, please let us know. Informed consent. It is a must before transferring the patient, I think. Because sometimes we receive patients from the other end of the country. And it's very difficult to get down patients and family to get the consent. Plan the transfer. Particularly, you might decide to transfer a patient without intubating. Of course, if it can be done, that is the best. However, in that situation, how are you going to send the patient? Mechanical ventilator. Will the battery power be adequate? So many situations. Recently, we had a patient being transferred. However, the good anesthetist came with the patient 10 to 15 kilometers in the highway before exit to Galle. Ventilator stopped working. And imaging. A very special thank goes to ECMO team at TH Parapitiya. It's a very dedicated team. They're doing their best at the moment. This is what we would like to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Manik, for that excellent presentation. And this is a question and answer session. We received one question from the Zoom chat box. The question is, what are the principal differences between ECMO and cardiopulmonary pump, basically CABG pump?
Cardiopulmonary bypass, you mean?
Yeah.
So I'm not a cardiothoracic surgeon to answer that question exactly, but I can tell that cardiopulmonary bypass machine is designed basically to support a patient while cardiac surgery is going on. This is to be instituted only in ICU setup, basically. The initial concept is same. However, slight differences, exact differences, I'm not really aware of.
There's another question. Why do you want to ventilate while patient attached to ECMO?
So we are talking about severe COVID pneumonia patients.
Yeah.
We need to make sure the lungs are getting ventilated, lungs are getting expanded. And of course, if we can stay without ventilating, that is awake ECMO, that is going to be the best option, of course. However, it's not easy. One reason we need, most of the time, we need, unless it is awake ECMO, unless the patient is very geared, most of the time we need to sedate the patient deeply, and we don't paralyze usually, but deeply sedate the patient just to make sure things are there in place. Patient won't shift his head from side to side and kink a cannula, shift his, bend his leg likewise. And of course, by the time, most of the time, when we receive patients for ECMO, those patients are basically been intubated and ventilated, gradually worsening all the lung parameters and everything. Basically, they are being intubated and ventilated already. Whenever available, when it is possible, we would like to go for awake ECMO because it's less damaging to the lung.
Can I ask you a question now? I think the pandemic of COVID has taught us so many lessons. Even the simplest thing, how to provide oxygen, how do you monitor their saturations? You're talking about one end of, supporting patients like an ECMO. Now, what do you think of the future of ECMO in Sri Lanka? If you want to set up, how you're gonna, what should be the ideal, way of expanding the ECMO services? Do we really need it, or if we need, how do we gonna probably plan it?
Sri Lanka is a small country. We don't need we don't need multiple ECMO centers. But having said that, Karapitiya alone might not be able to cater for the entire country. We need to plan ahead for mobile ECMO. If we can plan for mobile ECMO, we might be able to go and recruit a patient on mobile ECMO. Instead, start on ECMO and with mobile ECMO, transfer the patient to ECMO center. That is the ideal future that we are looking at. So at the moment, there is a plan for starting a proper ECMO center per se. There's a plan like that. However, in the future, I think there should be at least another 1 or 2 centers to cover the country. But always training and expertise, those things matter quite a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manik, once again. And on behalf of the Ceylon College of Physicians, I would like to hand over the certificate of appreciation. So currently now we are in the month of August, and this is the month of critical care medicine. And Dilshan is the president of the Ceylon College of Critical Care Specialists. And I would like to thank you, Dilshan, to joining with us today. And we are having another 2 events coming up in the next few weeks with the collaboration with the Ceylon College of Physicians and the Ceylon College of Critical Care Specialists. Then I would like to thank the usual sponsors, the GSK, and also the staff of the Ceylon College of Physicians, our usual staff, and also the ClinMark staff as well. And also a big thank to our audiovisual team, and they are persistently doing all these recordings and everything. Thank you so much and have a good day. Thank you.